Welcome back, everyone. As you know, from time to time, we always like to check in with public officials. We like to check in with the people representing us, local level, state level, federal level. And it so happens that the Supreme Court, by the way, has recently passed some, let's call them controversial rulings. So the reason I'm setting it up this way is that I'm kind of venturing into territory that we don't enter into too often. We don't editorialize here on Look Media Resource, and I welcome everyone's opinions. But I want to talk about Roe versus Wade, and it happened to lock up with an interview that we had planned with Assemblywoman Carrie Woerner, District 113, New York State, and she agreed to talk about it. So first, let me welcome you back, Carrie. It's great to have you, as always.
Jesse, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
I'm trying very carefully there to set that up so that people know that we respect everyone's opinion. But I want to talk about this. The Supreme Court, as we all know, recently set us back, according to some people, by overturning Roe versus Wade. Can you talk a bit about this from your perspective?
Sure. This is for many people, this is a very challenging decision that the Supreme Court made. Other people are feel satisfied with the decision. I don't think anybody is surprised that I am one of those who feels very disheartened by the decision that the Supreme Court made for a variety of reasons. It was 1968. I was 6 years old when Griswold versus Connecticut was decided, and women could first have access, married women could have access to birth control. I was 11 when Roe was decided. So my whole life, I have enjoyed the privilege of knowing that it was my choice when, if, and with whom to start a family. And to know that the next generation of women coming up behind me will not enjoy that privilege, that right. It's not really a privilege, it's a right to make decisions for themselves about their own body, their own healthcare, is really troubling and very disheartening.
I think the operative word here is choice. Not to take sides one way or another, but in some ways, being pro-life has a lot to do with choice. And I'd like to delve into that a bit, because, we tend to think, or at least you hear the argument that, which is true, and I believe this personally, that all life is precious, but that the ability to make the choice about your own life is probably where this starts. And that it isn't just necessarily some frivolous decision about, I don't think I want to have a baby. I mean, these are healthcare issues. There are families involved. There's empowerment involved. There's all kinds of situations. Talk to me a bit about how you feel about that.
Absolutely. I understand and I respect the sincere religious belief that that life begins at conception, and therefore to the choice to abort a pregnancy is unthinkable. I respect that. But I also understand that choice is the operative word in that statement. And from my perspective, I think that the decision on whether to terminate a pregnancy is a decision that is best left to the woman, her partner, her doctor, and her God. And there really is no role for the government here. And what we're talking about is not what choice to make, it's whether the government has a role in that choice. And I think that the way the Roe decision was made, it outlined that within certain parameters, the government has a role past the point of viability. But before that, the government doesn't have a role, that it is solely up to the purview of the mother. And I think that's really where what we're talking about is, what is the role of the government in these personal, really, really profound medical decisions. And I think where I come out on that is that I want everybody to be able to make their own choices, free from government intervention.
Right. As you were saying that, I was just thinking to myself that we can try to, as men, we can try to understand the depth of what you just said. But quite honestly, it's a woman's decision. Women give birth. They're basically the parent that holds the family together. That, the idea that it's just a question about abortion that doesn't address it. I think it was a story that I had heard that, in a country that prohibits abortion, even if the mother's life is in danger and she happens to be a mother and has a family and whatever, they still can't perform the necessary medical procedures to be able to save the mother. So, not to over dramatize it, but there are so many facets to this that it really does come down to the premise that as an individual, understanding the risk, the depth of the decision, whatever, it's about choice.
How do we say to a 13-year-old who has been sexually assaulted by a family member that she has to carry that pregnancy to term? How do we say to a mother whose health is in danger, she has cancer, for example, sorry, we can't administer treatment that would potentially extend or even save your life because the chemicals that we need to put in your body would harm or potentially harm the fetus, and so we can't do that. How do we as a society say these things, that these are personal medical decisions, these are personal situations that most of us can't even imagine being in, and so how do we as a society get to have a voice in those decisions? And I think that there is a balancing act in that as the decision in Roe said, past the point of viability, well, then you have to take into consideration the role of the life of the fetus, and I think that's those were important distinctions to make, and for nearly 50 years that was a nice balancing point that protected a woman's right to make her own choices about her own healthcare decisions, and the point at which there was another life that was viable. And I think that it's disappointing to me that we no longer have that balance in place. And in all of the legislative work that I do, I really strive to find balance, to balance all of the interests and all of the rights that are at play. And so this is one where we had that balance point for nearly 50 years. We had that balance point, and now we have lost it, and we've taken away rights from 51% of the population to make their own choices. And as I said, I just find that disappointing. It's women's economic empowerment is dependent on a woman being able to make a choice about her reproductive health, and so I do worry about the generation coming behind me and their ability to be equal partners in our state and our nation's economy, and what that might mean for us as a nation and as a state. New York has taken important steps to protect a woman's right to choose, and I'm very proud of that. But as a nation, I think we will be worse off because women do not have that ability any longer.
I want to cycle back on something because I wanted to touch on this before our time runs out. But in New York State, the Reproductive Health Act is in place, correct? And
Yes.
That's a measure in our state to provide protection for women, correct?
Yes, it is. We passed this a couple of years ago, and it puts in law the right to choose to terminate a pregnancy.
You know what? In all the years I've been here, and followed politics and God, my God, Vietnam War through Nixon to the man on the moon. I mean, you name it. In my tender young age here, Carrie, I just don't ever recall a topic that was so controversial as this topic. And you said something, and I would kind of want to end with this. None of us should ever underestimate the enormity of the responsibility of having to make this decision to start with, and think about that. So, the operative word there again is choice. Another one is balance. Another one is responsibility. And, I tend to agree with you, for 50 years, at least that was in place. Whether you were for or against abortion, the idea that was in place so that someone facing the enormity of that decision and that responsibility would have some options to weigh.
Absolutely. And that's, as I said earlier, from my perspective, I believe that these decisions, which are enormous in their consequences, are best left to the woman, her partner, her doctor, and her God. And the government doesn't really have a role. And the loss of balance in our policy making here is troubling, and I think it has implications for other rights that have been developed on the basis of the constitutional analysis that Roe was based on. It has implications for gay rights, for marriage equality, and while the Supreme Court seemed to have at least some of the justices indicated that they wanted to be clear this was not touching those, others were not so clear. So I think that it is troubling to me that the Supreme Court could make a decision to overturn precedent that could have really wide-ranging impacts across our society beyond the narrow, well, not even so narrow, case about Roe versus Wade.
Yes, I've got it. While you were saying that, I thought I'm still a believer in the power that we have, that we have the voting power. And I think that's something we should really remember and understand, that it's a real privilege for us to be able to vote so that we can have our voices heard. And maybe that's the ultimate way that we can contribute to the direction that our country goes in, is by making certain that we vote.
Well, certainly, everybody should exercise their right to vote. We have that right, and you should take responsibility for doing it. I say that all the time, that use however you want to vote, use your vote and cast it on election day or early election day or by mail or whatever, but cast your vote. I think that I also want to say that I hope that in the days and months and years ahead, that we can get back to a place where we look for balance, where we look for solutions that balance the rights, all the rights, recognizing that that means some people are going to have to accept something. Everybody's going to have to accept something that they don't like, but that what we want to get to is balance, where everybody's rights are in balance, and that is, I think that takes some thoughtful work. It takes not grabbing for the easy solution, but doing the work to really try to understand what are each of the rights that are at play here, and how do we find a balance point. I am a firm believer that balance exists, but you have to look for it and you have to work for it. And I find myself challenged by what I see in our society is a grab for the easy answers, a grab for what's right in front of you, as opposed to saying, let's sit down, let's talk about this. Let's try to understand everybody's interests here and come up with a balance point that everybody can be satisfied with. And that this is not a winner take all game. This is about building a solid society that works for everybody. And that means you got to put the work in to make that happen. And so, for me, I think this is an opportunity for us as a society to say, okay, we're going to sit down and try to work together to come up with a balanced approach to all of these issues, so that we honor and respect the rights of everybody, and we build a set of policies and laws and procedures that work for everybody. It's possible. I know it's possible, but we have to put the work into it. So yes, everybody should exercise their right to vote. You should understand the issues. You should understand the candidates running for office. Absolutely. That is the privilege we enjoy as Americans, is the ability to choose our government. And we should always do that. But as a society, let's work on trying to find some balance together.
Well, Carrie, thank you for saying it that way. That really resonates with me, and I'm sure it just resonated with an awful lot of people. What you're saying is so true, and I hope that sometimes I think we were there, and we've kind of drifted from it, and I hope we get back to it. So at any rate, you have a wonderful summer. Look forward to seeing you at all these different events that we bump into each other at, including that store in Greenwich that we like to go to.
Fantastic.
Isn't that a great store? That's
terrific.
A secret that you have to find out about for yourself. Talking to the viewers there. Okay, Carrie, you stay safe, and thank you. And thank you very much for talking about this subject, okay?
You're very welcome.
Okay.
Take care, Dad.
Bye.
Bye.